We have three great panelists up here. First and foremost, we have Dr. Stan Thongrudge, who is a professor of anthropology at the City College of New York, who is committed to mentoring young adults, young professionals. And here, I challenge you guys to make that connection with them in our networking session that we'll have later on this afternoon. Media Anwar is up here as well, who is a recent college graduate from Middle Tennessee State University. And this is moderated by Zindan Barwani, who is a former entrepreneur and who has a passion for real estate in one of the hottest markets in the whole country. So, Zindan, it's all you.
Balin, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm really excited to be here today, especially talking about networking. It's something that everybody does. A lot of times we're not really aware of it. It's also something that is highly important as you progress in your careers. I want to briefly thank both Professor Stan Thongraj and Media Anwar for being here today, sharing their perspective on the topic of networking. With this panel discussion, we hope to showcase both the perspective of a professor and a college grad. Would you like to?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah. All right, great. Well, my name is Professor Stan Thongraj, and I teach anthropology of the U.S. South with a focus on immigrants and refugees in the U.S. South. Former high school basketball and college basketball coach and player, and I love the arts, and I'm really honored to share this space with some of my sheroes, such as Kassar and Suad and Chimen, who are here in the audience. Thank you for all that you do to enrich my life.
Hi everyone, my name is Media Anwar, and I've recently graduated from MTSU with a master's in biotechnology. Currently, I am working a couple of side gigs until I finally found my passion and getting into data analytics soon. So hopefully in a few years I can tell you more about that.
Fantastic. So our panel discussion is about networking, and we're going to start with an introduction to networking and the challenges that come with networking. Finishing it off with the benefits that you would get from networking. So I'd like to start by asking both of you to describe networking in your own words and what networking means to you.
Yeah, so for me, it is the whole concept of trying to create a community that works for you, right? And often we're so silent, and we often believe that we have to depend on ourselves, that everything falls on ourselves, the burdens of our success and our failures fall on us, but social networking and to create a viable network is one that can open doors we never knew existed, can provide resources we didn't know existed, and can just find, and it can be a space where you affirm yourself, where people know you, people know what you can do in ways in which maybe other folks and spaces cannot do that same.
Networking to me means like a way to connect with your communities and others that you haven't met before. More so, different ways to help your own self, honestly, just to, if you're struggling with something and you just don't know how to go about it, networking is actually the easiest and most efficient way to get answers.
So networking is based on building relationships and sharing ideas and resources to advance our own personal goals. But for a very long time, humans have lived in small social groups, and modern appeal to networking is not natural. It doesn't come easy, for everybody. We feel more comfortable in our own social and cultural groups, and there's challenges to networking that most of those challenges come from cultural and environmental, the cultural and environmental mindsets. So Professor Thongraj, this question is in three parts. Why is networking with others hard for some, and what are some barriers that minority students face when networking with others not in their social groups, and does fear and social anxiety cause many to stay reserved?
Yeah, thank you very, very much. So these are really, really important questions, and I think before we even answer these questions, we have to think that becoming a student is also a certain type of professionalization. And we often forget that there is a professionalization that takes place through high school, through college, and through graduate school. And so with that in mind, I'll answer your 3 questions. Why is networking hard for some? One is the fact that myself as an immigrant, I came from India in 1988. My father has a PhD from Harvard, and you would think I would have institutional knowledge of how to manage college, but my dad teaches graduate students. So he had no resources on how to best prepare for college. What are the pathways that you can go through? What are fellowships and scholarships you can get? And how do you build a social network in college? And so that is institutional knowledge. And most of us arrive, especially as immigrants and refugees, and as people of color, we enter college without institutional knowledge. So it's important to know how to network in college through the Career Center on campus, through clubs on campus, and through faculty mentors. We come from immigrant backgrounds in public schools where we are not asked to be outspoken, where we're not asked to challenge knowledge, we're asked to recite answers. And that does not professionally train us as students. Thus, we are not given the tools to engage with faculty in their classes, ask questions, and push the intellectual agenda. Being an active participant is not only about speaking up in class, but for most of you, if any of you are in college, and I would love to get media's take on this, how many of you have been to office hours? Part of the pathway to forming mentorship and to networking is using faculty office hours and being active with forming lines of communication. So with the barriers that minority students face, as I said, we do not have the roadmap on how to best approach college and networking. We don't know that our teachers and counselors in high school are key points of social networking. We assume that we just study well, we take the SAT, we apply to colleges, and we're done. But our counselors and teachers already have links to colleges across the US, and they have resources we don't know about. And this includes thinking about AP courses as a way to get yourself ready for college. Visit the campus where you see the fit instead of, ooh, they have a good college football team. I'm an anthropologist of sport as well. I could care less about sport. It's about what classroom size fits you. What types of specialty at that school can really push your career forward. Then don't settle for the campus closest to you, right? And that's one of the things we constantly hear about Little Kurdistan is that our students, our young people, do not leave either the city or the state to find the best fit for their intellectual and professional growth. Then demand the stuff you want taught, right? And this is where the networking is creating a network where we push for the things we want to learn. Why is Kurdish studies not part of Vanderbilt? Why is Kurdish studies not part of your high school experience? It's because as a community, you haven't demanded it. The Hmong refugee community in Wisconsin and in Minnesota made strong demands, and all the major public universities there teach Kurdish studies. Hmong studies, right? And so these are things you don't know. And then finally, with what the organizers have done and said, why not recreate a workshop where you get to network by preparing for college? A workshop that many of us, including myself, will be happy to lead on. How do you write a statement of purpose? How do you write a cover letter? How can you find the college that best fits you? And finally, fear and social anxiety. I think the social anxiety comes from being the very first, for some of us, in your family to go to college or graduate school. There is so much put upon you and the expectations are high. Thus, you live with the fear of failing families and parents who sacrificed everything to come to the US. That's a heavy burden. But know that failure is part of the journey and that mental health is the most important thing that we don't talk about as we go through college and high school. To think about how is social networking a form of mental health in college? that you can form the networks that affirm you as both a Kurdish student, but you as a scholar, and as an intellectual, and as a professional, and as an activist, right? And so ask for help and find resources on your campus, like the counseling center, the writing center, go to office hours, and these will help you manage your anxiety. To overcome them, as you stated, let's be uncomfortable so that we know there are new pathways for us.
Stan, I wish I had networked with you when I was in college. I mean, that's some very helpful information that he just provided on networking and media. When did you start networking and seeing the importance of networking when you were in college? What were some barriers that prevented you from networking with your professors and peers outside of your social groups? And what helped build your confidence to overcome those barriers of networking as a student?
So believe it or not, I used to be super extremely shy to even talk to my own friends. But ever since I joined the student council club at my high school, that's when I learned that, hey, you have to network if you want to be something. I had so many dreams and career goals and plans, which are very important. There's no point of pursuing something if you don't know what you want to do, and I know it's very challenging for some people to get into and think about just because of lack of resources and the things that we don't know that's out there. So fortunately in our time zone now, there's social media, there's middle schools, they have phones, so they can look up different things that we know as for career guides to show them. So when I first started was actually in high school. I had dreams of becoming a physician, and then over time, learning about certain fields and things, it kind of faded away from me, honestly. And I found a new true passion via networking, learning how. When I first found out how valuable it is when I got into college. Because you're honestly just put into a new place, new environment, and scientifically proven that your environment influences who you are. So I think surrounding yourself by important people or successful people, that's what I've done my whole life, that's what can help me gear my mindset on things and how I wanted to network. And in college, there's actually a lot of organizations right now. I'm not sure, I believe majority of colleges do and should have specific organizations and things for you to network outside of your what's given to you. But the barriers are the lack of knowledge of knowing what's out there. There's many things I found out until I graduated. Even after I graduated, I wish I knew about that. And I think with Kurdish professionals and other organizations out there, they help you lead you towards that, knowing what's actually out there. My barriers was I was intimidated. In college, there's certain professors that look scary, and I'm sure you guys can agree with that. They look scary. There's some professors that know a lot more. Some of them are smarter than you, some of them are not. So it's very intimidating for students to go up to them and be like, hey, I have these questions. I think that's the main barrier. That was a barrier for me in the beginning, and eventually, just seeing them and seeing other students and talking to your friends, like, hey, how did you get there? Or, I think people are always looking at each other as competition in a way. And I think we all can agree on that. We all feel like there's competition all around us, and that kind of makes us feel less valuable, which I think is absolutely wrong. Everyone has their own purpose, and they should focus on themselves, but also use your friends and environment to get to places that you need to be, and you can't do that without networking. So one of my examples was from one of my professors. I see how intimidating it is, but I heard and I see he's one of the best in that field I was interested in. So I walked by to his office, say hello. But first I would peek and just say hello, hi, just see if I get a response. Eventually, he started saying hi to me in the hallways, and then I eventually went to his office and said, hey, sir, I have all these questions for you. Can you please help me out? I'm just curious. And honestly, he was helpful, but there was a point that he was just answering my questions. I didn't feel a connection. When you're looking for a mentor or trying to find somebody to help you network or you can't just expect something out of a professor just because they're great at that position. You have to have mutual ideas, mutual connection, mutual interest for them to actually help you, for you to get the 100% benefit that you're looking for to help you network with your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of what you said deals, with the next topic of discussion, which is relationship building with your professors and with your peers, and even in your workplace. And we've all heard the phrase, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." But this phrase I think could be stated differently to where it's not what and who you know, it's who knows you. And it's going to that professor, walking by his classroom, introducing yourself, and getting to know them and having them know you, so you can build that connection. So knowing someone without a sincere, common professional relationship is not really knowing them at all. You are present in their classrooms, you show up every day, but how active are you, in that classroom, and what steps are you taking to actually build that relationship? So networking is not just using somebody for their knowledge. It's building a relationship and getting to know each other. And this leads into the next question. As challenging as networking can be, all barriers that hold many back, can be overcome. So Professor Thangraj has a mentorship program that he does with his college students, and he believes that it could be applied to even high school students. So Professor, can you tell us a little bit about your program and how students and professors can create a line of communication to build a professional relationship and get to know one another to start a mentorship?
So, before I go into that, just being here, all these thoughts are running through my head, so I keep writing down notes. I think one of the things I would love for the Kurdish professionals to be able to do, and I'll more than willingly help out, is to create partnerships with Vanderbilt, Belmont, Lipscomb, MTSU, and TSU, and Fisk, to see if there are opportunities where high school juniors and seniors can go and spend a day in a classroom, in a collegiate classroom, to see what that feeling is like. That gives them advanced preparation, right? And that's some of the stuff we do in Harlem and New York, where we bring in high school students into our classroom to give them a sense, so that the first day isn't shock. Right? It's like, oh, I've been here before. In addition to what I teach, I'm also the departmental advisor for the whole major of anthropology. And this is what I do to provide resources and rights, to let students know that mentoring is a right. It's a right that you have not demanded, right? It's a right you can choose to demand, but most of us go silent. So maybe what I can offer you now, if any of you have notes and pens, you can take notes, and I have my cards here. You can email me anytime. So here's one of the first stuff I do is to form a relationship with a mentor when you're in college and it's a large class. Don't expect that all of you can be outspoken and engaged and very vocal. Use office hours. Take the readings from that day, think about, what are things that weren't answered in class, and go to class and ask that. All of a sudden, you look like a very prepared student that's willing to push intellectual agendas. And that immediately shows the faculty member, this is someone I can trust and I can have a very responsible relationship with. Next, research a bit of what the faculty member's interests are by looking at their faculty webpage. And that will give you a way to also think about what are their interests that also intersect with what I want to do and be in the world. Then if there's someone whose class you have really enjoyed and they made you work hard and think in new ways, try to take a course with them. Mentoring happens, as you said, I can't say this enough, when you're most challenged and uncomfortable. As an undergraduate student at Emory University, I took 4 classes, including one graduate course with Dr. Robert Brown in African American politics. Never made an A. I kept going back and back because he made me grow. And when I was applying to graduate school, his letter of recommendation got me in. So take classes that excite you and challenge you and that are not easy A's. Be ready to be challenged. Next, email faculty. Don't tweet, don't Instagram, don't Facebook. Some of us, I think the best way to start is the professional realm, either during office hours or through email. And here's what you would really need to get out of a mentor. A mentor says the stuff that's hard for you to listen to. That's hard for you to take, but it's important for you to know. One of my best students, she's a doula and a midwife, very committed to racial justice and reproductive justice. She wanted to pursue a PhD in gender studies. And I said, Zoe, you are an activist. That realm at some point stops in a PhD. Why don't you think about medical school? She is now getting ready for medical school and wants to be a medical practitioner who has radical politics, right? So that was not a hard thing. That was a hard thing for her to hear, but you got to push the agenda. Then you will need 3 mentors by the time you finish college. And those 3 mentors don't have to be in your major. My mentors were in poli-sci, in Middle Eastern studies, and something else. I didn't have a single person from anthropology write letters of recommendation for me for graduate school. But you need 3 departmental mentors, educational mentors. And then finally, what a mentor does is allow you to open doors by introducing you to people outside of your field. I'm an anthropologist, but one of my closest friends is the former president of the New York Bar Association. So if some of you are thinking about going into law, well, hey, you might want to stop by my office hours and tell me, right? And one of my best man at my wedding and one of my dearest friends is the top hospitalist, medicine professor and medical doctor, internist in the US and is housed at Emory, which is a top 10 medical school. Guess what? If you're thinking about medical school, I know nothing about operating, I hate blood, but I have connections. A good mentor pushes you in ways and connects you to communities and expands both your intellectual and professional circle. And a good mentor is willing to also tell you when you need to stop, take a breath, step back, and then move forward. So a mentor also helps you in college know how to write a statement of purpose for the next thing you do in life, helps you with a cover letter, and helps you with a resume. I have all of those notes, so for anyone that's interested, I'll pass it to the Kurdish Professional Network as a tool that all of you can use at any time.
Thank you. So, media with what Professor Thanraj said about building lines of communication to building professional relationships or strong mentorship, do you believe it is equally important for students to be active and engaged in and out of the classroom to get recognized and known by their professors and their peers? And how would you describe a positive professional relationship?
Thanks. I 100% agree with Dr. Stan over here. It's because we look, like I said, again, with intimidation with professors, they're there to help you. They devote all their time and they're teaching you guys. So why not take advantage of that? If you, like whoever's in school now, if you have any questions, if you don't even know what you want to do, I would recommend just going in there now and just ask them, hey, I'm stuck. Just tell them you're stuck and tell them you can even though it's professional, some professors will want to know some personal things about you just to understand why you're in that position you are now. And I believe even if you don't have classes or any connection with a professor, just go in and just hello, introduce yourself and mention what you think, and if you just be blunt with them, honestly. Don't waste their time, don't waste your time. It's very important to build a relationship with your professor. For example, one of mine was in my first year in college, and he's the one who actually, after I graduated with my bachelor's in biochemistry, I just stopped by one day just to say hi, and he's like, well, what are you doing with your life? And I told him, and he was like, well, why don't you come back? Why don't you come back for your master's in biotechnology? We know you, I didn't have to take a GRE or anything. He's like, we know you know what you're capable of. Networking right there. He told the dean, and I got my connections in, my letter of recommendations in a day, just because I held on to those connections, those relationships with my professors over time. Even though I graduated, I didn't just cut them off. I would go visit them. I would go, email them. Some of them will want to connect with you via other social platforms, and that's okay. If you're comfortable with that. But you have to think about they're also humans. They also have their families, and they're as approachable, not just there for have a job.
That actually answers the next question I was going to ask you, Professor. But so, what are some ways to keep professional relationships healthy and useful?
Thank you. So one of the things I think that most students don't know in high school or in college is that your instincts are right. You got to trust your instincts. You have to realize that not all faculty are good mentors, and that not all teachers are good teachers. So you have to know where the limits are. There are some people who are brilliant scholars, but horrible mentors. And you have to navigate that pathway by trusting your instincts, right? And so I think in order for us to keep healthy professional relationships and useful, stay in touch. So the best way is to show your intellectual development over a year. How do you do it over a year? Is through 2 courses. So after you take 1 course and you show your abilities, the second course is the one that most clearly shows your potential. Because the second class shows the types of intellectual jumps that you can make, right? Because the first class, everybody can have an off semester, you can do this, that, somehow you do all right. But the second one is the one where you're already showing your commitment, that you want to learn under this person. And being a mentor isn't something one day you claim, right? I don't say, hey, today I am your mentor. No, it's something that happens through that year's worth of courses, coming to office hours, asking questions, constantly asking questions. Don't be the student that provides answers. Be the student that asks questions, right? And I think that is one of the things that really sustain and create a healthy relationship where all of a sudden the boundaries between faculty and student become blurred, and is one of intellectual sharedness, right? Where you're sharing as intellectuals, email, office hours, internships, being a research assistant with these faculty. Like I have 2 college students that want to help me on my newest project, which is on Kurdish diasporas, and I'm training them in the process of how to be a qualitative anthropologist, right? So these are things that now have become part of the mentorship.
So staying in touch, getting active, and getting known, building relationships with your peers and your professors, and in your workplace. We saw a great example of what social networking can do and the effect it has on a community a little earlier. And with the drive we had for the refugees in Syria, it started with a simple post, and slowly it just went viral in our community. So internet and technology has in a lot of ways made our world smaller. The tools for communication and information sharing are vast. How we communicate today has changed and challenged traditional networking. Professor, not all networking these days are done by traditional networking, and social networking has become more accessible and used more frequently by many. Platforms like Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, my brother's favorite, LinkedIn, and many others are highly recommended by professionals that share common interests. Does social networking have a place in college, or is it better to stick with traditional networking?
So before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that Councilwoman Surratt is here. We are so grateful to have people in legislative spaces. Thank you for all that you do. And this one, I'm actually going to turn the question back to media, because I think as a student, you can tell us more, and then I'll tell you how it's worked or how it hasn't worked for me as a faculty member.
Perfect.
So social media versus traditional networking. Well, I think both of them are very important. As a recent graduate student, I needed the social media platform to help me get into the fields I need. But besides just talking about career, it helps us find people that are similar to you, find similar interests, find relationships. This might sound corny, but your soulmate too. Just by social media and traditional, you first need to find a way. Like you need excuse me. Take a minute. So social media is like a much larger way to connect, and traditional is more face-to-face. We still need to be good at our communication, face-to-face communication skills, because if you have applied to a job before, they're going to see everything on paper, which needs to look good. Like you have to have your nice resumes, things for them to even consider you. But the purpose of an interview is having those communication skills. You must be the person that you're representing on paper. So I think both of them are very important. And as for networking goes, I think they correlate with each other, honestly. I think you need them both to do better, but to branch your opportunities at social media it's easier, and it's a more efficient way to help bring more opportunities to you.
Can I just mention that last question is really important to also think about how a social network can be toxic, right? So you got to really think not about building with quantity, but quality, right? Because with the recent Turkish onslaught on Kurds, there are all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork to support Kurds that are also part of an anti-Muslim racist society too, right? So you got to be strategic in finding a social network that moves your agenda, that works for you.
All right, so let's get to the Q&A. Thank you everybody for sending your questions in. And whichever one of you guys wants to take the questions. The first one, what are some ideas and suggestions for introverts to network?
Well, I'm an extrovert, so I'm not sure how helpful my suggestions would be. I think that's where social media comes in more helpful. Because usually with introverts, they're scared of how the other person will feel about them. So I think just, as in words, or there's ways to do it anonymously, just don't put your name down. Be who you want to be. I think that's what also going back towards when Dr. Stan was saying how most of us are comfortable in going to universities in our community. I mean, yes, I get it. I have Kurdish parents myself. It's harder for us to lead. But if you think about it, if you do have the advantage to go somewhere else, it's like you're pushing a redo button. You get to be who you want to be. So if you are an extrovert, there's different ways you can go about that, honestly.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask you another question. Yeah, we have a lot of questions, and we want to try to get to everybody's questions there. Would you like to add on?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, when you're an introvert in a collegiate classroom, faculty stereotype you in ways that are beyond your control. So as a college student, I was a quiet kid in the back with my hands like this and just listening, and they thought I was the nerdy model minority student that loved math and science but didn't care about social sciences or English. So they didn't give me a chance, and I realized that even though I was an introvert in those spaces, what I could do was go again and again to office hours, write, work on your research, make papers matter. Like when you turn in a good research paper, the faculty member will come and talk to you. You don't have to go and search them. They'll come and find you.
Going into another question about social media. We just got one that says, should you be friends with your work boss on social media? Why and why not?
Wow. Yeah, so I would say when you're on social media, if you have anyone that has a professional link to you, all your posts should be professional, right? And this is where we get so caught up with pictures of ourselves, certain pose, what's up, right? And I think the problem with that is it goes beyond our reach. it reaches circles that we might not have wanted it to reach, right? So what I do with my social network is none of my college students can enter my social network of LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook until they finish a year, after they're done with college and are out for a year, so they have a year to build their network, and once they do, or if they struggle, that's when I can come in so that they do the work too. But I think it's really, really crucial that at that point, you have to think about a social network as something that has to be built step by step, and you can't involve professional people if you have pleasure and desire and all these other activities that are important to us, but that don't need to be there in the professional space, because they come back to haunt you. You can share your politics, but don't share other things.
Absolutely, especially when you're on social media and there's a lot going on in your hometown, and you're not just friends with Kurdish people, you're friends with the world. So what you post, can damage your relationship that you have with people outside of your group. Another question. Let's see. We have a lot of them, and I'm going to try to get to every single one of them. Let's see. What advice would you give for someone pursuing a career that's not very common and going for an art career as a child of immigrants with the stigma around art? That's a great question.
I believe, since if that's your passion, just do it. Just find your ways to network, and that's where, again, with social media comes in handy, is you can just Google, or even if you use Instagram the most. I remember in school we would just put hashtag, physicians or whatever's public, just they're public for a reason. They want you to reach out to them. That's why they're posting certain things or having their profiles even active. So, but as for in our community, I agree with your worries about being different, and I think it's very important, because I know certain successful people that are in art, they were different once before too. So reaching out to them and seeing how they went into their field, I think that's the advice I would give. Just reach out to them and just tell them, again, be vulnerable. Tell them, like, hey, what are your doubts and worries, and then go on from there. But you should definitely pursue it, as long as it makes you happy.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things I would say is, you have to be careful when you make these choices. Just like everything else you choose in life, be strategic. Go at it with a game plan, right? Take a jump, a leap of faith, but you need to have support structures that help you along the way. And there are support structures within our own community that can help us go into being a musician, being an artist, being a singer, being a teacher, being a social worker. These are all opportunities outside of the high-level, highly valued professional, but we have to think about how back in our own homelands, there's the diversity of jobs and occupations that bring pride. Why do we have to come into the diasporic space and the diaspora and expect that the only thing we can be are engineers and doctors, right? We need all of this in our life, and a job. But again, certain jobs like art make it so emotionally difficult, because you're balancing the demands of your family, demands of your community, and the demands of the art world. But find the support structure that will affirm you. And this is where the social network comes into play. I was starting college to be an engineer. I was really good at math. But then I took one anthropology course and I was like, oh goodness gracious, what is going to happen now? I said, I'm still pursuing the engineer path, but I'm going to take some anthropology electives. I started taking more, and then I realized I had already expanded my social network. I had faculty that believed in me, that when I made the jump, I could land, right? And in the end, express yourself. Being a professional is a particular expression of yourself. So do it.
Okay, so we have a lot of technology questions. So with the modern era of technology having such a drastic impact on how we interact with others, how do we filter out the network that is good for us and the network that is not good for us?
Oh my goodness. Wow, these are such great questions. Thank you. It's really difficult because we don't know the network that's not good for us until it hits us in the face, right? So I realized when I was campaigning for anti-war campaigns in 2003, white supremacists, who I thought were my friends, of course I didn't know they were white supremacists, till they came and threatened me with a gun and so on. And then you realize the ways in which certain networks don't work. And I used to have a much larger Facebook page, but when I started criticizing the Hindu-Indian support of Trump, I got death threats from both Indians back in India, Hindus, and also Hindus here in the US. That's when I realized Facebook as a social networking site doesn't work for me. So you never know which doesn't work until it really malfunctions, right? You can't predict in advance. There are certain things you know, like if you have a friend that keeps walking around with a Nazi swastika, that's someone you don't want in your network. But everything else, you just don't know. But once that happens, it's really crucial to find ways to exit that person out of your network without poisoning the whole network. Because these stereotypes and these judgments float, and they have an afterlife that we can't predict.
The next question, how can we better engage high school students? How do we help them understand the importance of college and finding the right career path?
I think it's very important to get involved in your community and organizations that are within your school and also outside your school. I'm not sure what we have with, if Kurdish Professional does have they partner with different organizations for students to join in. You can volunteer pretty much anywhere. That's what I got involved super early when I was in high school. Like being in, if you are pursuing like something in the healthcare field, there's lots of programs within colleges for high school students that most high school students didn't know. For example, when I believe I was a senior or junior in high school, I joined Vanderbilt's Children's Hospital. I was with them for 4 years, volunteering with just patient in child life center, helping with them, just playing with them in the playrooms. And eventually, after that, I got myself into shadowing physicians just because I was with them. Because it all starts somewhere. And for high school students, the sooner you get involved, the easier it is to build connections to help you prepare for college, or even to know what you want to pursue in college.
And I think what Zay said earlier about junior KP, so I guess the plan is already in motion to get something going to reach the high school students before they get to college, at least with KP. And the next question, how do you recommend we reach out to other professionals and engage them in order to become mentors for our youth? So how do you recommend we reach out to other professionals and engage them in order to become mentors?
So one of the things I think that has to be done, especially when it's working with communities where the children are often the first in their families to go to college or to graduate school, is to start much earlier with having college and professional fairs at the high school level, where you bring in people for a day of lectures or workshops, right? And we rarely ever do workshops in high school anymore. And I think it is something where, in order for us to reach high school students, we need to come to where they are, instead of asking them to come to us. Like, we have to bring in the interesting things that we do. Like, with a show of hands, how many of you know who Colin Kaepernick is? Right? With the ways in which sport has become a place of protest, some of the things that we do at my college, because I do anthropology of sport, is we go and we lead workshops on what are the politics of sport? What are the rights that athletes have across the spectrum, from amateur sport to college sport? And what that does is give high school students a stake in the project of learning. And when they're invested in learning and invested in knowledge production, they become producers of knowledge. And that changes their whole scope on how to go to college and what to do in college. Because all of a sudden in college, I started taking an advanced anthropology course, and I got really excited about writing about pickup basketball. I wrote a 40-page paper on pickup basketball, and I've never been so excited. And guess what? 15 years later, that 15-page paper turned into my PhD dissertation on South Asian American basketball culture and the politics of race, gender, and sexuality, and the rise in Islamophobia after September 11th, and how Pakistani Muslims manage Islamophobia in the post-9/11 world through the American sport of basketball. It all happened because someone gave me a chance to be seen as the expert, to be seen as a producer of knowledge. And all of our youth and college students have that capability and that capacity. You just need the space and the opportunity to claim it, to own it, and to do it.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions. If you have any other questions, please do send them in. What are some do's and don'ts when networking? When networking, I become self-conscious and question my networking methods.
Do's and don'ts with networking. I believe the best way is to consider how the other person would feel if you're trying to reach out to them. Like Dr. Stan said earlier, as for professors, read their background, make sure there's common interests. That's one of the main important things, like I mentioned earlier, is you don't want to go to somebody that has absolutely nothing to do with what you're interested in. That's something that you don't want to do just because they're successful, they have a lot of things going for themselves, but if there's no common interest with you two, there's no point of actually pursuing them as a mentor or even ways to network with them. If you need help with ways to network, there's YouTube, there's LinkedIn, there's lots of mentors, there's lots of resources in school too. There's like, for example, at Middle Tennessee State University, we had a career center specifically for students to learn how to network, how to communicate, how to put themselves out there to become professionals. The reason why we go to school is to become professionals in that specific field, learning about it, that specific topic or whatnot. But the main important thing is to actually know what you want to do at first and find creative, strategic ways to pursue it.
So I think one of the first things is a social network that works for you allows you to have a voice. You have a voice, you have a say in it, right? And you're listened to what you say. And I think one of the best ways to find a relationship or a social network that doesn't work for you is when it's abusive and it's exploitive, right? Where you are constantly being used for various kinds of things and you are never listened to, but you're forced to do things, right? And this often happens with faculty and students, and you have to be really careful that you don't stay in a relationship just because that person has a big name, right? You don't say, oh wait, it's Cornel West, the most prominent African-American studies scholar of all time. But he's really exploited, which he's not, right? I'm just using him as an example, right? But you have to think about what are the places of affirmation. How do these mentors and social networks push you to affirm yourself? If they can't do that work of affirming yourself, they're exploited. And that affirmation can be something that happens in the future, but they're still doing it, right? They're affirming who you can be, who you never thought you could be. That's affirmation. Exploitive relations bring you down, make you lose sense of your own self. And I think you have to be really aware of those social networks and those mentors or those who claim to be mentors that do that.
We have one more question, and what advice do you have for someone that wants to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, and they are constantly having to deal with people thinking they are doing it for their families and not for themselves? Great question.
That's a great question. Like I mentioned before, getting involved is very important. Doing things, and you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. That's the main important thing I feel like our community struggles with. It's the competition thing. It's getting out of hand, honestly. And we, speaking to certain females or even guys, one-to-one, or even if via social media. Some of you haven't talked to in person at all, but they comment on my post. When I put myself on a social platform to help specifically females to get involved in certain things, get out of your comfort zone. But again, at the end of the day, we don't have to prove ourselves to anyone but your own self, and of course, make your family proud of you. But again, you can be proud. You can make them proud if you're not proud of yourself. There's no point in that.
Yeah, what I would say is don't judge your journey before you get there, right? Don't go to college. You can go with the hopes of being a doctor, but be willing to change, right? And the same way in which you can go to college with the hopes of being an artist and you end up being an engineer, you got to give yourself the opportunity to see college as a period where you don't know what you're going to be, and you embrace that, to see how college can shape you. It's not who you go in at the beginning of college, but rather who you come out as, right? And that's where that journey is so important for you to go through, and especially when you're in these high-level professional fields, when you feel that you need to form a sense of community. Find other folks of similar backgrounds who are facing that same thing. Start a club. Clubs are so helpful in college. For me, I'm one of the few Indian Americans I know in my community who is a doctor but not a medical doctor, right? Who is a baller but not a spelling bee champion, right? And so what has happened is I formed a very particular club of these guys who have either played professional basketball, collegiate basketball, and have expansive social justice politics. Because that's a group where they affirm me professionally, they affirm me personally, and they affirm me through their politics, right? And I think you can create that. You have to put the work in to create that space, and that space will do the work for you.
For many of you that don't know, Professor Stan is actually a baller. He plays basketball, and we have a 3-on-3 basketball tournament here, in Nashville. You're more than welcome to, come. I'm sure the guys would be happy to play with you.
Well, at age 45 now, I just turned 45 this year. I've become one of the old timers on the court, but I'll do it. I'll come and bowl.
Honestly, thank you both so much for your point of views, and I hope you guys have picked up some information to help you with your networking, and hopefully we can, go back to a lot of these notes that will be shared on KP.
And I just want to thank all the organizers of the conference, both the people we've seen on stage and all the folks that have done the undercover and behind the curtain work that has made this really possible. And thank you, and we're just honored to share the space. Thank you.
And thank you too, Lydia.